we're talking about the largest, most destructive war in all of human history. A conflict that literally redrew the map of the world. But to really get it, you can't just memorize dates and battles, no. You have to see it for what it truly was. A high-stakes geopolitical thriller, fueled by ideology, raw ambition, and some of the most brutal gambles ever made. It's 1942. We're in Stalingrad. And this isn't a battle, it's a meat grinder. We're talking street to street, room to room fighting in the frozen, shattered ruins of a city. The German Sixth Army, the one that seemed absolutely invincible, is now trapped, starving, and literally fighting for its own survival. So that's the big question, right? How on earth did this happen? To answer that, we need to rewind the clock. We need to understand the terrifying, unstoppable machine that brought them to the very edge of victory and then right to the brink of total annihilation. Okay, so our story really kicks off back in the 1930s. Nazi Germany starts this very calculated campaign of aggression, basically poking and prodding to see how far they could push a world that was absolutely desperate to avoid another war. You can see it happen step by step. Hitler just starts tearing up the treaties from World War I, and with every single move, Britain and France go with this policy of appeasement. They kept thinking, okay, if we just give him this one more thing, he'll stop. But all it did was make the Nazi regime even bolder. And then came the move that lit the fuse on the whole powder keg. Now the wild part, the thing that made this invasion possible, was the completely shocking German-Soviet pact. This was a secret deal between Hitler and Stalin, two guys who were supposed to be mortal enemies, to just split Poland between them. With the Soviets out of the picture, the German tanks rolled right in. And the way they did it was with this terrifying new tactic, Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Forget the muddy, static trenches of World War I. This was all about speed, shock, and surprise. It was just unstoppable. It crushed Poland, then tore through Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and even France with unbelievable speed. So by 1941, Hitler pretty much controlled all of mainland Europe. But instead of stopping, he turned east and made the biggest, and what would turn out to be the most fatal, gamble of the entire war. He decided to invade his own supposed ally, the Soviet Union. Now we have to be crystal clear here. This was not a normal military operation. This was a war of annihilation. The goals were purely about ideology, to wipe out communism and to seize what they called Lebensraum, or living space for German settlers. But to create that living space, they planned to eliminate the people already there. Mass starvation wasn't a byproduct of the war, it was a weapon. So on June 22, 1941, more than 3.5 million soldiers stormed across the border. Think about that number. The operation was codenamed Barbarossa, and it achieved almost complete surprise, just smashing through the Soviet defenses, which were completely unprepared. And as the German army pushed deeper and deeper into the Soviet Union, something else followed right behind them. This was a systematic program of mass murder. It wasn't an accident of war, it was a central goal of the entire Nazi project. We have to be really precise about what this was. The Holocaust was not random violence. The key words here are systematic and state-sponsored. This was an organized, bureaucratic plan to literally erase an entire group of people from Europe. And it didn't just happen overnight. It was this methodical, terrifying escalation. It all started back in 1933 with discriminatory laws and violence. From there, it ramped up to forcing Jewish people into isolated ghettos. And then finally, starting in 1941, it became the final solution. The plan for total industrial-scale murder in killing centers. 6 million. It's a number so large, it's almost impossible to really comprehend. 6 million individual lives, men, women, and children, all extinguished because of this hateful ideology. But even as this unbelievable darkness was spreading, the war itself, well, the momentum was starting to shift. That massive gamble Hitler had made in the East was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. Which brings us right back to the frozen ruins of Stalingrad. The impossible happened. The Soviet Red Army didn't just stop the Germans, they launched this huge counterattack, surrounded the entire Sixth Army, and just wiped them out. The myth of the invincible German soldier was shattered right there, in the snow. And then, from the other direction, from the west, came the haymaker, D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in the history of the world storms the beaches of Normandy. This finally opened up that second front that Stalin had been begging for. Now Germany was trapped in a two-front war it had absolutely no chance of winning. And this success of D-Day really hinged on one of the greatest deceptions in military history. The Allies created a completely fake ghost army, used double agents, and cracked German codes, all to convince Hitler that the real invasion was coming somewhere else. It was a masterpiece of intelligence. So, with the tide completely turned, the walls of what Hitler called Fortress Europe started to crumble. The Third Reich was now caught in a giant vice, and it was being squeezed from every single side. Just look at the timeline. You've got the Allies pushing up from the south through Italy. You've got the forces from D-Day advancing from the west. And from the east, you have the Soviet Red Army in a relentless, brutal drive straight for Berlin. The end was no longer a question of if, but when. And in those final, chaotic days, with the sound of Soviet artillery shaking the ground above him, the architect of this whole nightmare killed himself deep inside his bunker. Just about a week later, what was left of Germany officially surrendered. The war in Europe was finally over. But in its wake, an entire continent was left in ruins, and a totally new world order was about to rise from the ashes. And this was the new, stark reality. On one side, you had the leaders of the Allied powers, America, Britain, and the Soviet Union, already meeting, already designing the future of the entire planet. And on the other side, just total, absolute devastation. Germany was a ruin, about to be carved up by the victors. And that left the world with one final haunting question. With their common enemy gone, that fragile alliance between the Western democracies and the communist Soviet Union started to crack. The end of one massive global conflict was already setting the stage for the next one, the Cold War.